Hey there everybody, welcome back. This is Mystic Games. Today we're going to be talking about The Last Flame. So I've been playing this game quite a bit lately, and I just wanted to go over kind of like a beginner's guide for people. So obviously you guys can see I'm showing you guys my stats here. I'm not maxed out by any means. I'm not an expert at the game. I'm sure there's people that know far more than me. With the disclaimers out of the way, I am generally pretty successful on Novice so far. I have a basic idea of how to team build and stuff. I just want to go over that with everybody. So, you guys have relics up in your left corner. These are what you get throughout the game. Generally, you're going to want to go with something that synergizes with your team. I had a lot of shield building on my team, and I had a lot of healing and spell power. So that was generally my focus on artifacts. As you guys can see up here, spell power, just a passive heal for everybody, max health increase, and then shield increase gains, spell power and spell power percentage per max mana increases, shielding random allies. Then I had dynamite, which just every time you can click on this and it activates it. As you can see, it has the orange aura now. Click on it again, it goes away. But in non-elite fights, in non-boss fights, you turn it on and you essentially get a 30% chance of getting a relic. Fishing rod's always solid. It just decreases your max health, but increases your team size. Generally, having a bigger team size is better than having the negatives that you're going to get with these items. There's other items that increase team size as well that have negatives. Most of the time, the negatives are worth the team size increase. Eye Scroll is a hexatile buff, which I can't show you guys. I should have recorded this before I won the match. I don't think it will let me go back to show the screen without going back to the main menu. But on the map, it's a hex tile map. You put your heroes down on the hexes, the enemies are on the hexes, and you move into each other. It's kind of like Dungeons & Dragons RPG style layout. 2 of the hex tiles be turned into magic buffing hex tiles, which was fantastic for my team. And then I started off with, you can research at the shop, which just essentially every time you get to a shop, you can spend 5 of your trophies that you get from victories to invest in relics, which is why I have a good amount of relics. And you get this is like a buff for your whole team, and you get these from you get them from the flame when you're going through the map portion, which is I can't even show you guys the map, unfortunately. It's like a blue flame. It's a blue campfire, essentially, icon on the map as you move across. It's set up like Slay the Spire, where you move across the map and then you go into combat mode, which is this screen here. For every 700 shields done, all heroes gain 1 mana regen. At 7 stacks of mana regen, all heroes just gain spell power. Generally, spell power does help even physical heroes most of the time, so pretty solid buff, and I just had a lot of shields going on, as you guys can see here. Pretty much got this every 8 seconds minimal, which it was generally going to be more than that because I was getting additional shields and my guys were shielding, so it was pretty much every 4 seconds guaranteed that these procced, that you were going to get the concealed proccing at least once, if not twice by that point. But what I did want to go over was the heroes, because it will let me click on the heroes. For some odd reason, it won't let me click on the map. So I did a shield and shock based team with a little bit of frost and a little bit of healing, essentially just to deal out additional damage and to heal my team. Now, this is very confusing looking for a new player, but as you progress through the game, you are going to upgrade your heroes and get different abilities, which are random, on a sense, and then you have abilities that are set. So just so you guys can look, we're going to look at Ruin, who's the top left corner here. This is just a basic overview of your heroes. Ruin has his name, it has his HP, which you can see the base is 1400. I had, at the end of this battle, I had 3271 plus health. His max mana is 9. Every time you hit your max mana, they cast their active ability. Every hero has 1 active ability, that's good to know. So the active ability is here. So for him, it's called Lightning Explosion. He explodes around him, dealing some damage, inflicting 3 shock debuffs to the enemy, and then for every HP he has, it deals a little bit more damage. and it heals him for that amount. He also taunts his target, so they target him. As you can see, I was dealing a decent amount of damage with this. This is not really for damage, this is more for adding shock and healing than it is damaging the targets, in my opinion. He also has healing shield, so every 6 seconds the hero receives a shield equal to 3% of its max health. When getting a shield from any source, the hero heals for 3% of his max health. This has a cooldown on it, but gaining shield is super good for him. It heals him and it gives him a shield. So he's a pretty good shield shock hero. That's kind of what he's built around. Now, the left side you have items. All my items at this point are combined. It's very hard probably for you guys to see on your screens, but we'll just look at this tome right here, the orange tome that he's holding at the top. You have a book, and then you have the armor attachment to it. So the book by itself was the 88% heal received, 88% shield received, and 88% ethereal amplification. And then the book, or the armor that was added to this book is the 240 HP and the 24 defense. There's an ability to fuse items together, like you take an item here. In the situation for that, the armor would have been here, which is the heirloom, and then the recipe would have been the book. And you combine them and you make a better item, essentially. So I was stacking his ability to increase his shields and healing received because he is the tank and I just don't want him to die. Everything was built around giving him life and giving him shield. So, and defense, obviously. A little bit more defense makes it so he reduces damage. These are all your stats over here: defense, attack speed, crit, critical strike damage, spell power, mana regen, and the specialties. Now, these two bubblets right here, these two passive traits, are not guaranteed. Every time your hero levels up, he gets like a bonus stat, or he gets a passive trait. So for him, I randomly got this passive trait, which was every 5 seconds the hero gains a 60 shield and then plus 15 per summon, which was really nice because I had a total of 4 summons, so he essentially was getting 120 shield from this every 5 seconds, which is just, again, more shield. And then I also had randomly rolled every second gain max HP equal to 3 times the amount of shock on the enemy with the most shock. So essentially he was just gaining health, or maximum health, based on shock, which he's obviously wants health. He obviously does more damage based on health and gets more healing based on health. So this was really good for him. I randomly got very good additional passives. Sometimes you'll get a passive that's like this, the hero, because essentially these passives are other heroes' basic passives, which is the first one. Like you can't get the same passive normally. Like healing shield probably won't proc for him, but you might get the arrows for him. And obviously the arrows is the hero has a 15% chance to rapidly attack an additional time. Like getting something like this would have obviously not been as good on Ruin as the 2 that I randomly rolled. I got very lucky on Ruin and got very good passive stats, is simply what I'm going to say here. So everything with Ruin worked out very well. This is a good kind of Ruin build that you might want to do. Obviously these 2 are random, you're never going to be able to guarantee them. There are ways to mitigate that, but I'm not going over that in this video. I really just wanted to go over hero overviews. I'm not going to go over this guy. I didn't really put too much effort into him. He was just applying additional shock for me, which was his job here. Oh, actually, he didn't even apply additional shock. He was just doing physical damage. I thought he was applying shock, but I just realized he wasn't even doing that. He was just doing damage based on shock. I didn't even do spell power on him this time. Normally I do attack damage, spell power, and attack speed on this guy, and I built him a little different this time because he wasn't my main focus of the team. It was pretty much my tank, and then my magic casters I was really focused on. I could have probably replaced him with Kasara, and it probably would have been more helpful, but I got her too late to actually do that in the run. Anyways, we're going to talk about Flynn next. Flynn is a damage caster. Let me see if I can show you the general traits. Okay, so general traits will kind of tell you what the hero does. Let's go back to Ruin for a second here. you can click on this button. Normally it's just popped up when you're picking your heroes to give you a basic idea of what you're picking. You have, he's a melee, which means he needs to be 1 hex space away from everything else. He is a tank. He is a shield master. He is a heal self-healer. And he is a shock debuffer. So generally, when you look at the general traits for a hero, you're going to want to look at where they attack from, you're going to want to look at what their job is, and you're going to want to look at what they specialize in. So he's shield, health, healing, and shock. And the reason when you pick your heroes you want to look at these things is because you want them to align. So like him, I click on him. He is ranged, so he's a ranged damage dealer. He deals ethereal damage. He has hybrid damage, so he focuses on both physical and spell damage, and he utilizes shock. Him having shock was the reason I picked him as one of my initial heroes, because he aligned at least a little bit with Ruin. Obviously not the best combination, there are better, but he was okay to pick. He was really the only, I had a pretty bad start. I had Ruin and then pretty much him to pick from. Everyone else was not helpful. Everyone had different specializations, so it was really hard to fuse anybody together. Next, we're going to actually talk about Flynn, because I actually want to go over Flynn a little bit more. Similar to how I did with Ruin, just so you guys can get an example. And then we'll probably go over Naomi, because Naomi's a support. He's a physical damage caster, essentially. She's a caster, but support caster. So he's a ranged unit as well. He's a caster, which means he's going to cast magical spells. He's going to use spell power, spell damage, and mana regen. Spell power and spell damage are pretty much universally the same thing. But yeah. He also has mana regen mastery, which means he focuses a lot on mana regeneration. That's more of a consideration that I would say is a personal thing and not a team specialization thing to look at. Shock debuffing is he utilizes and generates shock, which is good to be with Ruin and good to be with Xandmar. As you can see, he was the 3rd person I picked for my team. And he also is a stunner. So his basic ability, his passive I should say, is every 4 seconds the hero deals spell damage equal to its target and nearby enemies equal to 15% of his max regen. So generally for somebody like Flynn, you're going to want to stack mana regen. You're going to want spell power, mana regen, and maybe mana reduction. But generally you're going to probably focus on mana regen and spell power. Because he just deals additional damage passively to everyone around, not even attacking, for having a ton of mana regen. He, as you guys can see, I had him at 30 mana regen by the end of the match, which is pretty insane. I actually had her higher somehow. She must have got luckier with the weapon here. But that's pretty strong. So he was dealing 15 times, my god, 450 damage every 4 seconds by the end of the match, just passively, not even attacking. His casting ability is Lightning Nova, so every time he hits his 9 mana, it's very important to know, he gets a cast of Lightning Nova, which he hits everybody around, pretty much usually your tank, and then he deals damage to them and stuns the targets. So as you guys can see, mine was dealing 542 damage every time he would cast it. So most of his damage was passive, like he was doing 80 damage every time he attacked, but for the most part, he would do damage from his Astral Staff ability, and he would get his Lightning Nova every 9 mana, which was proccing very quickly, because you guys can see I generate 1 mana every 3, pretty much it was, to get his cast, it took 3 seconds to cast for him by the end of the match here. If I had reduced his mana a little bit more, he would have been a little bit quicker. As you guys can see here with his items, I gave him -1 max mana, and then I gave him every 4 seconds the Wearer's Shields, the lowest HP hero, for 16 times mana regen. So he essentially was using this to do damage on the enemy, and then he was using this to give shield to my allies. Very solid build. I had the sword, which is every 4 seconds the wearer gains either 20% attack damage or 2 mana regen at random. This can happen 50 times. Normally you're never going to reach 50 times because you should have won the fight at that point. But again, for him, very strong, because if I proc mana every time, he just becomes insanely mana. All his other stuff was going to be just doing way better. I do actually like the Haiju Sword because it really helps physical damage dealers, but it can even be used on casters if needed. And then I gave him the High Mountain Rain, which is 4 mana regen, which I shouldn't say, it's 2 mana regen technically, and then it's 4 mana regen because I attached the book to it. So it was a total of 6 mana regen right here. Whenever you regenerate a mana, which when you look over your mana regen, it tells you, the hero regenerates 1 mana every 33 seconds because I have 30 mana regen. Whenever mana regen generates mana, the wearer has a 50% chance to generate an additional mana. So I essentially just get a free mana every time I'm regenerating. So, as I said, really it probably took me about 3 seconds to get this, but with this ring on, it would probably cut that in half. It was probably 1.5 seconds for him to cast his ability. He was pretty much spam. Oh my god! By the end of the match that I was just doing against the boss, he was spamming stun on him. Like, he barely could move because the stun just kept proccing. He had like probably a 0.7 or 0.2 seconds of movement, and then he got stunned again. So it was very good. And then we're gonna go over Naomi, and I think we'll end the video there. I don't need to go over everybody else with you guys, but this should help new players, because it is, like, the first time you play, like, the item fusion was super complicated. I'll probably show you guys that again really quick at the end. And because once you start getting the item forging and you start understanding team construction, which is really what I'm focusing on right now in this video, you can start building teams that are going to work and not lose. She's a ranged support shielder that wants mana regen. So she has a similar ability to Flynn, which is whenever she generates mana, just like him, he deals damage when he generates mana. He deals damage focused around his mana regeneration amount, where she, every time she generates mana, starts to gain spell power over time, up to 80 additional spell power. So she wants mana regen as well because it boosts her actual spell power overall. You can also reduce her mana cost to help out. So all those things work well with her. Generally, you're going to want to focus on mana regen and spell power and reduction in mana cost for their active ability for casters. So for her, I had -1 max mana every 4 attacks. That's just her shooting her little wand out there, or staff, I should say. The wearer would gain 2 spell damage for each bleed and shock on the enemy, which was obviously why she got, part of the reason why her spell power was so high was we were emitting a lot of shock onto the enemy, and she was gaining spell power from this every time she attacked, pretty much. Spell power plus 25, plus 1 mana regen. Every 2 seconds, the wearer has a 5% chance per max mana to gain 2 mana regen. So pretty much she had 9 times 5, because I have 9 max mana, and it was 9 times 5, so 45% chance every 2 seconds to gain 2 mana regen. So pretty much 50-50. But pretty solid. As you can see, she ended up with more mana regen than Flynn did. He only had 30, she had 45. She was gaining a mana every 0.22 seconds. And then she had 4 mana regen with the sword, similar to Flynn. So I'm not going to go too much into the others, but these are the other people I use. She's a caster frost damage user. She's very solid. If you see her and you need damage in the beginning of the game, she's a very good choice. She also does well throughout the game. She has frost synergy. She's one of my go-to champions. She also has summon synergy as well. So pretty good ranged hero. And then you have Elreal, which I actually like Elreal. Some people have rated him pretty low. I think the AoE damage plus heal to your allies is just really good. It deals damage and then to an area, so it hits everything, and then it heals all your allies in the area. it's a nice little boost to the team. This is also a support caster healer, but it's a damaging healer, which is what I like. That little bit of damage goes a long way, and you're going to be stacking spell power anyway, so you're essentially just going to be dealing additional damage and then healing everybody for a ton as well. As you can see, this person had the most actual spell power by the end of the match, but the lowest amount of mana regen. But they also have a very low mana cost to actually cast their spell, so it didn't matter. Anyways, that's all I want to talk about there. I'm going to do one more quick overview for the weapons. As you guys can see, this is a Jade Dagger. This is considered an heirloom item, not a recipe item. Whereas the Mana Polearm, if I'm putting my hand over the item that's attached to it, the Mana Polearm is considered a artifact or a recipe. Technically, I could have attached the Jade Dagger to it, but I attached a mana regeneration staff to it. So we'll actually show you guys that. So here, again, heirloom, you bring this item down, you take the recipe, which would have been the spear that I was just showing you guys, without the staff in it, and then you would drag it down here, you hit the connect button, it puts them into one, and then the item becomes complete. You can't use recipes without putting an heirloom into it. So sometimes you're better off almost waiting on recipes and heirlooms based on the items that you get to slot into them. The only thing I'll say about that is in the early game, it is worth re-rolling, because you can re-roll with your flame, which is your life. It is normally worth re-rolling a few times to try to get a good slotted item for your starting team, especially your tank, to help him survive. Generally, if your tank survives the fight, your team survives the fight. If your tank dies, your team will die. It's just the way it rolls. It's also good to have, like, on this team I didn't have one. It's almost always good to have a secondary a tank if you have enough space for it. They don't have to be a full tank, but you know, somebody that can kind of half do damage, half tank is pretty solid for that job. Just to kind of hold off waves in case the enemies spawn around the hex where you can't just put your tank down and know that everybody's going to attack them. One final word of advice for new players: if you're still here, this is actually pretty important. Make sure when you click, because you can look at your enemies' abilities as well if you click on them during gameplay. Make sure you always click on your enemy during gameplay, because you can learn their abilities. Some enemies will hit everything in front of them, and if that's the case, and you can put the tank in that spot and then move all of your heroes out of the way, and then only your tank will be taking damage. Those kind of things are very important to know. My first run, I had no idea. I was not reading the enemies. I did not know I could read the enemies, and it just made the game a lot harder. Anyways, I hope this video helps some people out and gets you into the last flame. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to help out. Alright, later guys.